You've probably noticed it too. Men aren't chasing relationships the way they used to. They're not dreaming about forever, they are calculating the risk of heartbreak. Why? Because today loyalty isn't assumed anymore. It's constantly doubted, tested, and often proven false. No matter how good she seems, there's always a quiet, analytical part of you that wonders, can I really trust her? This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. You've simply seen too much. The lies, the games, and the excuses dressed as modern empowerment. The truth is, modern men are walking away. Not because they can't love, but because they no longer believe true loyalty exists. The deepest fear isn't loneliness anymore, it's betrayal. It's the quiet realization that in a world where attention is currency, commitment has completely lost its value. A man can give everything, stability, consistency, presence, and still feel instantly replaceable within seconds of a single swipe online. Modern dating has become a marketplace of options, and loyalty has turned into an outdated luxury. This reality means the risk of investing fully now clearly outweighs the reward of commitment. But here's our focus before we point fingers. Understand this. We are not here to blame women. We are here to decode the fundamental psychology that makes the collapse of loyalty possible. We're going to break down why men are quietly giving up and what this truth reveals about the world we're all living in. Now that we've established the emotional debt modern men are carrying, we need to decode the specific psychological mechanisms that shatter their faith. Loyalty doesn't die in one dramatic explosion, it erodes over time, brick by brick. These 5 reasons reveal the silent processes that destroy belief in a partner's commitment. 1. TNIST. When truth becomes too expensive, imagine this. An absolute nightmare scenario. A man spends 20 years raising a child, teaching, providing, loving, building his entire identity around fatherhood, only to find out one day that the child was never his. Not by blood, not by truth, just by an illusion carefully maintained over 2 decades. That moment doesn't just destroy trust in one woman, it rewires how he sees every woman after her. Because betrayal built on deception doesn't just break hearts, it corrodes reality. When truth becomes too expensive, people inevitably start living on lies. Many women lie not out of malice or cruelty, but out of fear. Fear of losing the image they've built, the comfortable life they've created, or the version of themselves they desperately want others to see. The lie quickly morphs into a shield, a way to survive the consequences of their own choices without facing accountability. But here's the crushing weight they fail to realize. Every lie told to protect themselves kills something sacred in the man who believed them. Men don't necessarily shatter because of the infidelity itself. They shatter because they realize how long the performance was hidden. It's the duration that inflicts the deep trauma. The way someone can look you in the eye every morning, say, "I love you," and still guard a secret that completely rewrites your life story. That isn't just infidelity, that is emotional homicide. Women often profoundly underestimate the psychological cost of sustained deception. For men, loyalty isn't measured by perfection, it's measured by truth. It's the ability to face consequences, to own mistakes, to look him in the eye and say, "I did this, and it was wrong." But when truth dies, loyalty instantly dies with it. Once a man experiences that level of deceit, once he sees how easily a truth can be buried, how comfortably a lie can live beside him for years, he stops believing in honesty altogether. He stops asking questions. He stops trusting his own judgment. He stops investing his soul, because in his mind, every smile could be a cover. Every apology could be a rehearsed script. Psychologically, this reaction is pure self-defense. It's the mind's protective mechanism shouting, "Never again." The trauma of deceit fundamentally reshapes attachment. It transforms affection into suspicion, curiosity into caution, and love into calculated risk management. When a man loses faith in truth, he no longer sees relationships as something to build, he sees them as something to survive. And from that point on, emotional distance becomes his only safety net. The paradox here is agonizing. The woman who lies usually believes she's protecting him. She tells herself, he doesn't need to know. It'll only hurt him. What she fails to see is that the lie doesn't just protect the present, it poisons the entire future. Because once the lie comes out, and it always does, eventually, the damage can't be undone. The trust that took years to build evaporates in mere seconds. And even if forgiveness comes, deep belief never does. Once a lie becomes her comfort, truth becomes his punishment. That is how loyalty is killed, not in the brief moment of physical betrayal, but in the years of silence and deception that came before it. 2. Challenge response. When boundaries are mocked, there's a predictable, quiet shift that happens in too many modern relationships. A man sets a reasonable boundary, maybe about how his woman dresses in public, how late she stays out, or who she entertains in her private messages. And almost instantly, he's labeled insecure, controlling, or fragile. But here's the truth hidden beneath that accusation. When a man enforces a boundary, he isn't trying to dominate. He's trying to protect the relationship's structure, the mutual respect, and often, the woman herself from dangerous situations. Yet, modern culture has twisted that act of leadership and care into an attack on freedom. This is where the emotional fracture begins. Every single time a man's attempt to lead or express discomfort is mocked, something crucial inside him shuts down. He learns that expressing his authentic emotional needs isn't strength. In her eyes, it's weakness. That speaking up won't be heard or respected. It will be weaponized against him. So, he grows silent. Not because he stops caring, but because he realizes that silence costs far less than confrontation. Women mistakenly call this silence emotional distance. Men, internally, call it survival. The truth is, boundaries are not cages. They are the necessary structure that keeps loyalty and respect intact. But in today's world, boundaries are frequently viewed as restrictions, not protection. The defensive ego often mistakes reasonable leadership for absolute control. It rebels against guidance not because the guidance is wrong, but because it exposes accountability. Psychologically, this pushback is a defensive ego response. When faced with correction, the ego feels immediately threatened. Instead of healthy reflection, it retaliates. The woman pushes back not to protect her legitimate freedom, but to avoid the discomfort of self-awareness and adjustment. And that is the critical turning point. Every time she mocks the boundary instead of respecting it, she unknowingly sends a clear message to the man: your protection doesn't matter here. After enough repetitions, he stops offering that protection. It's a dangerous trade-off. Once a man stops enforcing boundaries, resentment takes their place. He no longer corrects what hurts him. He silently collects it. He begins building a quiet wall of emotional distance, brick by brick, reaction by reaction. Modern relationships fail not because men stop trying to lead, but because genuine, caring leadership is now instantly labeled as selfish control. A woman who cannot respect reasonable guidance will eventually lose the man who provides it. Not because he stopped loving her, but because he stopped seeing his value in the relationship. Loyalty thrives on mutual respect. But when respect turns into mockery, loyalty instantly becomes a mere performance. She plays the part, but the vital connection dies. Deep down, the man begins to associate vulnerability with danger. So, he adapts. He stops explaining, stops correcting, stops showing the parts of him that care too deeply. And what she eventually calls emotional unavailability is actually the painful funeral of his last honest attempt to lead and connect. Every time a man's boundary is mocked, a part of his trust dies with it. And once trust goes, loyalty never stays long after. 3. Tichi work tmt. When proximity breeds illusion, there's a quiet, insidious chemistry that forms long before anything physical ever happens. It starts innocently, a shared laugh in the hallway, a casual complaint about a coworker, or those consistent check-ins that slowly, organically turn into daily conversations. And before she even realizes the shift, the crucial line between connection and temptation has utterly blurred. Workplace intimacy isn't always about lust or desire. It's primarily about exposure. When a woman spends 40 hours a week around another man, sharing goals, stress, and victories, she's living in sustained emotional proximity. The human brain doesn't neatly separate professional from personal. It simply follows the powerful patterns of familiarity. And familiarity, over time, consistently becomes attraction. Psychologists call this the familiarity principle. The more we are exposed to someone, the more we inevitably begin to like them. Add genuine compliments, shared humor, and the mutual validation that comes from achieving shared goals, and suddenly there's an emotional bond forming, one her loyal partner at home often doesn't even know exists. It always begins with the harmless, sounding excuses. He just gets me? We're just friends. It's completely harmless. But what feels harmless in the moment is the most dangerous illusion of all. Because every affair, regardless of whether it stays emotional or turns physical, begins with an innocent conversation. One that crosses no visible line, but dangerously weakens every invisible one. For the man watching from the outside, it's a nightmare of uncertainty. He knows attention is the modern currency of affection. He knows how easily deep connection builds where consistency at home fades. And he knows the cold, hard truth. No relationship can indefinitely survive unchecked exposure to sustained new emotional desire. Women often underestimate how powerful consistent emotional attention can be. The body follows the mind. The moment she starts confiding her deepest issues in another man, she immediately starts disconnecting from the one at home. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity. It doesn't require a bed to exist, it just requires consistency. Modern workplaces are breeding grounds for this. Long hours, shared stress, mutual validation, all create the perfect conditions for an emotional substitute to form. And when that bond deepens, loyalty erodes quietly behind professional smiles and office politics. The tragedy isn't the betrayal itself, it's how predictable it has become. Men see the pattern repeated daily in their culture, in their friends' lives. They've watched it happen too often to believe that their particular relationship will be the single, special exception. That's why modern men hesitate to commit. Not because they hate women, but because they've seen too much proof that temptation never truly sleeps. Psychologically, men interpret opportunity as risk. In a world where women are constantly surrounded by high-quality options at work, online, and everywhere else, the very idea of exclusivity feels incredibly fragile. So, they protect themselves the only way they know how, by not believing in exclusivity at all. Loyalty doesn't die from a single, dramatic seduction, it dies from exposure. One seemingly harmless conversation at a time. 4. Teach come fokarudukoyan. When stability turns into boredom, there's a dangerous, critical point in almost every long-term relationship where genuine peace turns into routine, and routine eventually turns into insidious emotional decay. At the beginning, she wanted nothing more than a stable life, a man who is consistent, grounded, and utterly reliable. But once she achieves that stability, something quietly shifts. The initial excitement fades, and what used to make her feel profoundly safe starts making her feel trapped. That's the painful paradox of comfort. The more predictable you become, the less visible you feel. It's not that she stops loving you, she stops feeling you. And when a woman stops feeling, she invariably starts seeking. This is where the silent corruption begins. She's not chasing another man at first. She's chasing the version of herself that used to feel alive. The thrill, the uncertainty, the rush of validation, all the intense sensations that stability slowly, gently erased. She'll call it missing the spark. But what she's truly missing is the chaos that once made her heart race during the chase. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. It is the universal human tendency to quickly normalize comfort. What once felt special becomes standard. And when there's no emotional contrast left, the mind aggressively craves new stimulation. For men, peace is the ultimate reward and the goal of life. For many women, it's tragically the beginning of restlessness. The irony is brutal, the same consistency she once begged for becomes the very reason she detaches. She starts scrolling more, dressing differently, flirting subtly, not because she's unhappy, but because she's profoundly bored. And boredom is the silent breeding ground for betrayal. A man who works himself to exhaustion to keep her safe and secure doesn't see this coming. He genuinely believes that providing stability absolutely guarantees loyalty. But emotional loyalty isn't built on comfort, it's built on curiosity. And once she stops being curious about him, she will inevitably start being curious about someone else. This is why men feel blindsided when relationships collapse. They were diligently building safety, while she was frantically searching for stimulation. They were protecting what she already had, while she was longing for what she didn't. Comfort kills tension, and tension is the essential fuel of desire. Without it, connection degrades into mere companionship, predictable, peaceful, and emotionally numb. For men, comfort equals success. For women, it can quietly feel like the end of the story. That's when she starts rewriting the script, looking for something that makes her feel wanted, seen, or dangerous again. And the tragedy is that she'll risk everything stable and good for something that feels new, even if it isn't real or sustainable. The painful lesson is simple: the safer she feels, the more invisible you can become. Not because she stopped valuing you, but because comfort effectively numbs perception. It makes her forget the immense cost of what she has until she is tragically at risk of losing it. Loyalty in this context dies from comfort. 5. When openness feels like a threat, it usually begins with something small and specific. A man asks to see his partner's phone, not to control her, but to calm the deep, unsettling unease that has been gnawing at him for weeks. She pauses, her tone shifts. Suddenly, he is the villain in a story he didn't even know existed. "You don't trust me." Those 4 words instantly turn the entire situation upside down. What started as a request for honesty quickly becomes an accusation of insecurity. He's not just searching for evidence of betrayal, he's desperately searching for peace of mind. But the more he asks, the more she hides. The more he tries to understand, the more defensive she becomes. This is what psychologists call the secrecy defense mechanism. When someone feels that their privacy is being invaded, they protect it fiercely, sometimes even when there is absolutely nothing tangible to hide. For women, privacy feels like identity. For men, transparency feels like love and safety. And that's where the profound disconnect begins. Men interpret openness as safety. If she has nothing to hide, why not show me? Women interpret it as invasion. If you trusted me, why would you need to see? These are 2 coexisting truths that can't exist without severe friction. The irony is excruciatingly painful. The more he needs reassurance, the more her walls automatically rise. The more she guards her phone, her messages, and her past, the more convinced he becomes that there is something deep inside worth guarding. And whether there is or not, the damage is already done. Loyalty isn't always proven by exposure, but secrecy always plants a devastating seed of doubt. Once that doubt enters a man's mind, it grows relentlessly like mold in the dark. Every notification becomes an immediate trigger. Every unanswered text is a question mark. He doesn't want to live suspiciously, but he also can't unsee what he's felt before the moment when blind trust turned him into a fool. For women, this defense feels harmless. "I just want some space." But what she calls space he experiences as distance. And distance is the death of connection. It makes him watch his own relationship from the outside, like an uninvited guest in a life he helped build. The sad truth is that most men don't need proof of loyalty. They need the feeling of it. The small, open signs that whisper, "You're safe here." But when those vanish, he withdraws into silence. He doesn't argue, he observes. He doesn't accuse, he adapts. And once he adapts to the distance, the relationship starts dying quietly. Secrecy isn't always about cheating, it's about control. The need to own your narrative, to stay unexposed. But love cannot exist beside self-protection. Because love, by its very nature, is exposure. When 2 people protect themselves more than they protect the fundamental bond, loyalty has no air to breathe. Loyalty dies when transparency itself became a threat. 6. The male contribution to collapse, the crucial missing piece. Now, we must face the critical missing piece in this psychological analysis. The collapse of loyalty isn't a one-sided failure. Men have their own significant contribution to the problem. Many men interpret masculinity as the suppression of vulnerability. They see strength as the ability to endure silently, to never show weakness, and to be the rock. But this is a facade of strength that actively sabotages trust. The emotional withdrawal when hurt or confronted, instead of engaging. the man retreats into unreachable silence. He believes he is protecting the woman from his pain, but he is actually initiating a destructive emotional withdrawal. He builds a wall and expects her to climb it. The pursuit of competence over connection, he focuses obsessively on providing material competence, money, stability, fixing things while completely neglecting emotional connection. He fails to understand that women leave men not because they stop providing, but because they stop feeling seen and heard. The cycle of emotional unavailability. When a man is consistently unavailable emotionally, he starves the relationship of the intimacy it requires to survive. He pushes the woman to seek emotional validation and connection elsewhere, often leading her into the very traps discussed in the previous 5 points. Tichi realty. Loyalty is destroyed not just by external temptations, but by the internal emotional vacuum created by the man's own silence and perceived invulnerability. If a woman stops feeling her man's presence, his mind, his fears, his dreams, she will eventually seek out a man who is willing to share his vulnerability and connect on a deeper, resonant level. The collapse of loyalty is thus twofold. It's the woman's failure to resist external temptation, and the man's failure to maintain the internal connection that makes the temptation irrelevant. We must acknowledge that loyalty is destroyed when the man's emotional withdrawal creates a void that the world is more than ready to fill. While the first 5 points dissect the psychological threats initiated by external forces or the feminine ego, the analysis remains incomplete and ultimately unfair, without addressing the profound ways men contribute to the collapse of loyalty. Loyalty is a system, and often, the system fails because one half stops maintaining the vital infrastructure. 1. The facade of strength. Emotional withdrawal. The primary male contribution to the breakdown of trust is not malice. It is emotional suppression. In striving to be the rock, many men commit the fatal error of believing strength means never showing vulnerability. They adopt a facade of strength that is rigid and cold. When challenges arise, or when the man is hurt by a boundary being mocked as discussed in point 2, his default mechanism is withdrawal. He retreats into an unreachable silence. He believes he is protecting the relationship from his own pain, but he is actually initiating a destructive emotional vacuum. He stops communicating his inner world, his fears, his dreams, his true emotional state. He builds a wall and expects his partner to climb it constantly. This silence is not strength, it is a profound failure of connection. The woman interprets this withdrawal not as stoicism, but as a lack of care, starving the bond of the intimacy it needs to thrive. 2. Prioritizing competence over connection. A critical mistake men make is focusing obsessively on providing material competence, money, stability, problem solving, while completely neglecting emotional connection. The man sees himself as successful because he is a good provider and a reliable problem solver. He believes that his labor and his provisions should be enough to guarantee loyalty. However, he fails to understand that women leave men not because they stop providing, but because they stop feeling seen and heard. When the focus is exclusively on fixing things outside the relationship, the man neglects to nurture the vulnerability and shared experience inside it. He provides a comfortable house, but he fails to provide an emotionally safe home. This imbalance creates a perfect opportunity for the woman to seek the missing emotional validation, the deep conversation, the feeling of being truly understood, from external sources, often leading to the workplace temptation or comfort corruption scenarios. 3. The failure to lead emotionally. The modern man often demands respect for his leadership, while simultaneously refusing to engage in emotional leadership. When a woman tries to initiate a tough conversation, the man views it as an attack rather than an invitation to intimacy. He avoids conflict, hoping the issue will disappear, only to find that his avoidance is interpreted as cowardice or emotional laziness. Emotional leadership means initiating vulnerability, setting the tone for open and honest difficult conversations, and being the first to apologize or seek clarity. By failing to lead emotionally, the man allows resentment and unresolved issues to fester. He creates a toxic internal environment where the relationship feels stagnant and suffocating. This stagnation makes the woman susceptible to the feeling of boredom and restlessness, comfort corruption, because the man has stopped growing and engaging on a deep, curious level. 4. The misinterpretation of peace for many men, achieving peace routine, quiet, no arguments is the ultimate reward, a sign of relationship success. They retreat into the tranquility they have earned. However, they confuse peace with stagnation. They stop actively dating their partner and stop trying to surprise or delight them. This leads directly to the comfort corruption discussed earlier. The man's reward, the stable routine, becomes the woman's punishment, boredom. He stops pursuing her emotionally, assuming the deal is closed, while she perceives his settled contentment as a sign that he has stopped valuing the active, vibrant connection. Loyalty, in this context, fails because the man stopped being the active guardian of excitement and curiosity within the bond. The realization is clear: loyalty is not destroyed only by external forces. It is also destroyed by the internal emotional vacuum created by the man's own silence, emotional withdrawal, and the mistaken belief that competence can substitute for genuine connection. For the bond to survive, both partners must be fiercely committed to active loyalty, constantly tending to the emotional infrastructure, not just the material one. At some point, every man who has been hurt comes to a quiet, powerful realization. It's not just women he stopped trusting, it's the very belief in guarantees. Faith in loyalty dies the moment you demand proof of it, because proof only exists after trust has already been broken. The true solution is not found in controlling her actions, but in achieving emotional mastery over your own reactions. Stop asking, "Can she be loyal?" and start asking, "Can I remain grounded if she's not?" That is where strength is rebuilt, not in predicting betrayal, but in knowing it cannot destroy you anymore. When you rebuild trust in yourself, no one's betrayal defines you. You stop interpreting deceit as proof of your weakness, but as evidence of their character. From that point, loyalty stops being something you beg for. It becomes something you attract through your own unshakable standards. The power of active loyalty is not passive, it is an active choice that must be inspired daily.